Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Poems story about the things behind the poems in my first collection, Between Hindsight and Foresight. If you've not seen any of the videos before, I do encourage you to go back and look through some of the older titles in my video collection. Yes, I'm sorry, I wasn't always so great at telling the stories behind my poems, but they do still give interesting insight into the sources behind my work. This week's poem is called Search for Truth, and I'm amused at my own self because of two reasons. This original form of this poem was definitely when I was in high school. And the reason why this poem and thinking about the source of this poem amuses me is because it's unusually pessimistic for me. I did use poetry in high school and throughout my life as a catharsis, as a means of getting rid of emotions or ideas that were plaguing me or were constantly on my mind. And that's both good memories, good experiences, and bad ones. Most notably, my poem Dark Place, which I did a video for months ago, expresses my feelings about living with depression. So when I'm reading Search for Truth, and I can tell, and I remember writing it when I was young, when I was in high school, but I don't remember necessarily why I was quite so pessimistic about it. The only thing that I can assume when I think about the lines and I think about how I express myself is that the long forgotten source of this emotion, the source of the frustration expressed in the poem, was being lied to. What we know and what we discover when we investigate is not always what it seems. People, friends, situations are not always what we think they are. And when we start to question, we start to lose our faith in those people, events, and situations. So, sometimes we see only what we want to see. And we sit in that blindness and we believe what we want to believe, and we don't look any further and we don't look any deeper. There is an odd reflection in today's whole fake news crazy about people not checking their sources and people believing whatever that they're told or whatever they choose to believe about topics and feelings, emotions, people, everything. Just because we believe a thing does not make it true. Just because we don't know a thing doesn't mean it's unknowable. And just because we are optimistic or just because we feel that change can happen doesn't mean that all the evidence to the contrary prevents it from coming true if we choose to make it that way. The changes that we want to see in society, just because we believe that they can happen doesn't mean we're innocent, that we're ignorant, or that we, that we're not seeing the truth of things. So that conflict between what we know and what we can prove, what we are innocent of and what we learn to our detriment, that conflict is a running theme throughout my poetry, that duality between knowledge and innocence, and what each of those mean, and whether each one of those states, being knowledgeable or innocent, is better than the other. So, does the search for truth invalidate the attempt to search for the truth? Is it a difficulty thinking about something that, especially a belief or an opinion that's linked to an emotion, if it is a more kind of intangible thing that we're investigating and that we're trying to gain knowledge on? Does the fact that it's intangible mean that searching for the truth of it invalidates the thing? Just because we believe something, if we go out to find proof or find more information about that thing, does our doubt and our search for that knowledge invalidate its existence? Now, I know that's probably a little bit deep and probably a little deeper than I was even necessarily thinking in high school when I wrote the poem, but obviously just because the poem exists already doesn't mean that its meaning can't change even for the person who wrote it. I think it's important to know about poetry and about writing that there are no wrong answers. There are no wrong interpretations per se. Just because the poem is set down and printed and published does not mean it dies. Doesn't mean that the author's intention dies or that the author's emotions dies, or even that the reader can't be touched by it in a way that the author never intended or expected. Part of the reason why, and I said this in my earliest videos, part of the reason why I'm doing these stories behind my poems is so that we have some basis or some connection where I can tell you what they mean to me. As a teacher of English literature and a teacher of English language, I get so many high school students who look at poetry and think, what if it's just a cloud? How do we know that the writer meant to do that? How do we know that that was intentional? Maybe they just wanted to use that word instead of that word. Does it really have to be so deep? No, it doesn't have to be so deep. And sometimes meaning is acquired by a poem or acquired by a word by accident. But sometimes it's intentional. And so these videos, to tell you my story, will give knowledge to those who don't know me and who may never meet me about why I wrote what I wrote, what it meant to me, and maybe they can find a connection for themselves. Because what I try to do with all of my writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, poetry, prose, whatever, what I always want to try and do is connect with my reader. And if they're feeling what I felt, let them know that they're not alone. If they've never experienced what I felt, if they've never been through what I've been through, maybe give them a little window into it so they might discover someone in their own lives that has that experience that they can feel closer to or empathetic towards, knowing that this is what is. So that that balance between knowledge and innocence, especially when that balance or when that investigation has you searching for the truth of a belief or an opinion, is important and something I try to do throughout my writing. The search for truth when it is about a belief or opinion can be particularly difficult because you will run into people who have that experience or don't have that experience, and they believe and feel what they do despite not knowing enough to believe any differently. And when you run into somebody who has more knowledge and more to back up their opinion, we can sometimes be made to feel small and ignorant. When someone says, oh, I can prove that your opinion is wrong, or I can prove that your belief is wrong because I've read this, this, and this, or I have lived several years or several decades more than you, and so your belief is completely invalid, and your feelings connected to that belief completely invalid because you know nothing. And so the search for truth is also a slight backlash against that problem, where instead of having an honest and open dialogue about a lie or about a newly discovered piece of information, you have a suppressing of interest, a suppressing of the search for truth. Instead of helping someone learn something new, you're dismissing them as ignorant. So I guess the reason why this poem feels so pessimistic to me is because by the end of it, I must have been stuck on that truth that I learned, and on whether or not there's any point to trying to protect someone's innocence or even protect my own innocence if, you have the choice between knowing and losing that innocence or remaining ignorant and happy in that ignorance. So a short poem, not my best piece in the whole collection, but something that I felt needed to be said in the fact that it was reflecting of frustration. I wanted to know things. I wanted to not be lied to. I wanted to be happy and innocent, but not have that innocence taken advantage of. So I guess we're all going to continue on in that search for truth. And I hope to see you next week so you can see me talk about another poem where we search for the truth of the story behind that poem. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again.